Good morning, all. Adam Deval here, mental health warrior. Down with the cold, flu, whatever you want to call it these days. It's not COVID. Don't get me started. But anyway, I know I look like a ghost, so if people want to call me Casper today, that's absolutely fine. Anyway, today I've got, firstly, I've got to apologise to my guest because I cannot pronounce his last name.
It's all right,
I've been
mate.
trying
You're
for
not the
over
first
an hour.
person. So the DZ pronounces like a J, so it's Corey Gaidzionis phonetically. So it doesn't look like it sounds anyway. No one ever gets it right, so I appreciate you not trying.
I'll just call you Corey.
Perfect.
I have got Corey. He's from Australia, and all I've got to say is good evening to you.
Good morning to you, Adam. How are you?
Paulie.
Paulie?
Yeah, I've been like this for, a few days now?
Yep.
Yeah, I literally had to force myself to cancel the another live from the other day, so yeah.
Yep.
I don't like cancelling podcasts. I don't.
Oh, it's all right, mate. It's all good.
Yeah,
Hopefully
the other night I tried falling asleep about 10 p.m. and I was awake until 5 o'clock in the morning.
Yep. Yeah, that's hard.
Yeah. So anyway, we are live on Facebook. We are live on YouTube. And we're going to dive right in with some quick fire questions for you, Corey. So we're going to say tea or coffee?
Tea.
Cats or dogs?
Dogs.
My partner's not going to like that. She's a cat person. Jazz or pop?
Jazz.
Okay, another jazz lover. Basketball or rugby?
Rugby.
Okay. He's already answered cats or dogs.
Chocolate or vanilla?
Chocolate or vanilla?
Chocolate all day.
Chocolate. Right. And the last one, I'm going to say Pepsi or Coke?
Oh, give me water.
Fair enough. There you go. All right, water or filtered water?
Filtered water, if it's available.
Oh, absolutely, yes. Filtered water's the best. Now, so for the viewers who's going to tune in, if I end up like tissue, I'm prepared. That's just me fighting my own on whatever I've got. Now, for the viewers, Corey, just tell us a little bit about who you are.
So I guess I would identify as a husband and father, and I've been through a stage where I would have called myself a mental health warrior in the past couple of years. I guess I've been on a journey, really. So I was really had a lot of anger, a lot of pain from my childhood, and I kind of carried that through in my working life, my family life, my friendships, etc., and then I had an incident at work 5 years ago where someone passed away in my arms, and I had the opportunity where the only way I can explain is that my brain box exploded. So I was deep in depression, PTSD, on the meds, and really not functioning very well at all. And I started getting into work with a purpose. So I had a program called Project Recycle where I worked with kids who were disadvantaged and just took bikes into schools and stripped and rebuilt them. And then more recently, I've stepped into men's coaching. So I work with men who I guess have the same affliction that I had. So I was a workaholic. So all I did was work, and I probably trained too much, like too much exercise a lot of the time. Like I built this kind of facade, it was many years later that I worked out that I got into bodybuilding to create this protection. This body became my tank to protect myself, essentially. And then now I'm kind of doing some coaching of men, businessmen who have aggression, are stuck in working too hard, helping them kind of shift away from that. But my real passion is taking young people on rites of passage, so helping parents reconnect with their kids, but also taking young people into the bush and teaching them about mental resilience, around spiritual awareness, around using their bodies physically. So it's really about challenging them mentally, physically, and spiritually to be the best versions of themselves, I guess, is where I'm at with life at the moment.
Does that mean you can read people?
Can I read people? Yeah, I think I'm pretty intuitive when it comes to that. I guess in my career, I started out in the Navy. I spent 4 years there, and I realised very quickly that I wasn't a yes man and that I didn't fit, because in the military, you have to say yes to everything, and it doesn't matter how high you are up the rank, there's always someone who's telling you what to do. So I worked out pretty quickly that wasn't for me. And then I've got a couple of trades under my belt, but I progressed into management even during my apprenticeship, and I worked out that I'm a very good people person. I have the ability to kind of understand where people are at and know how to kind of meet them there. So I've been in leadership roles. I've had personal training companies. So I've kind of been in that space of, I guess, reading and helping people for many, many years.
Yeah. We'll actually talk about your experience in the Navy a bit later on. So I'm going to start with your education. Like what type of little boy was you? Was you the class clown? Was you the smart ass?
What type of boy was I? I think at school I wore a mask of funny, which wasn't really who I was. I was quite timid and fragile, but I kind of wore this character. I would fart in class, and so I was kind of really wanted to be liked by everybody. I guess I stepped into the role of people pleaser, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's very easy to put that mask on, especially when we have our own challenges.
What's interesting in rites of passage, like when I take teenagers in rites of passage, we talk about emotions, like what are your big emotions, and their anger, depression, and anxiety are the big three. And I get the biggest kid who's the athlete and the alpha boy, and I get him to hold a feather out, and he holds it out in front of him for as long as he can, right? And then we're talking, and then his arm starts to drop. I'm like, it's just a feather, man, hold it up. And then we keep talking, and eventually it gets to the point where he can't even hold the feather. And then we talk about how we can just drop our emotions. We can choose to hold them or drop them. But we also talk about within that space, I say, they're your big emotions. Who do you share them with? And they don't share them with anyone because they wear a mask of happiness. So we have this exercise where they have I didn't even really connect this back to my childhood until just now, but I created this exercise where we have a paper plate, and on one side has a sad face, and on the other side has a happy face. It's like, what is your real face? And most of them show the sad face, and what's the face you wear to school? And it's the happy face. And then we have a conversation around that, and they all kind of get to realise that they're all in a similar situation.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting to be bringing that into my work life now.
Yeah. So at what age did you realise and accept that you had these challenges?
I was probably 38.
Wow.
When I realised that, I was in this loop, right? I would get angry, I'd have shame about it, and I'd say sorry to everyone that I'd hurt in the process of me being angry, and then I would loop around and I'd go again, and then I'd start the process again, and I'd loop around, I'd go again, and then it was only when Brendan died in my arms that I started seeing psychologists and started having conversations. So initially we healed there's a whole story behind why I thought Brendan's death was my fault, but I had to unpack that. And then as I was unpacking that, I'm like, well, I've unpacked that now, but I still have all these other emotions and angers. So because I was in the space of being coached, I guess, through psychologists and different aspects, I started to unpack that and started to realise that I had this inner child wound that really dictated how I behaved in my whole life. So I kind of went back and started, not through traditional psychology, that didn't really work for me. It worked to a point and then it stopped working. So then I started seeking other coaches who kind of had, I guess the coach that I ended up working with had a mix of like Eastern philosophy, so meditation those aspects of it and movements, or the more holistic approach, but also really, I guess, doing inner child work through meditative processes. And I really took that by the horn. So I would kind of have a session, and then he would think that we'd be going to work on my 8-year-old, and I'd worked on my 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13-year-old over that week, sitting under a tree in my local park. Like I was all in on it because I knew that was where the work was for me.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because it's always good to talk about our ages as well, because it's not just a number.
Yeah, but there's a beautiful poem called 11, where talks about there's a girl it's her 11th birthday, and there's a red jumper at school it's itchy and it's got long arms and stuff, and one of the school bullies says it belonged to this particular girl in the classroom, and then she was like telling the story about how she felt like her 4-year-old self and her 5-year-old self.
Yeah.
And so it's just really beautiful way to explain the inner child to other people, the concept of inner child to people. Like we're all, like I still have moments, like on Tuesday I had a moment where I was my 5-year-old self. I threw a massive tantrum about something that my kids did, right? So, and I can hold myself in shame in that, or I can just go, you know what, I was just my 5-year-old self, and it's not okay to behave that way, but I'm also not going to carry shame and guilt along with that, you know.
Yeah, absolutely, because we need shit in our lives for us to grow.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, no pain, no gain. Now, obviously, let's talk about your time in the Navy. Now, obviously, you've already explained that it wasn't for you, and you were there 4 years. But like, what was you like when you first came forward saying, right, I want to join the Navy?
I don't really remember the process of all that. I think for me, it was just about getting away from the environment that I was in. So I guess that was like the first time I started running away from my situation. That's a symptom of like PTSD. You run away from, so fight, flight, or freeze. Right? I was flighting from the potential risk of harm to myself. So I don't really remember the process as such. From my memory, I kind of think that I kind of went through it on my own. When I got to the Navy, though, I kind of like really put on a mask because nobody knew me. Nobody knew who I was. So I was really like this egotistical, like just really quite crazy. And I had this petty officer Crawford, who he just hated me from day dot. Like he gave me the name First Seal. And he said, you're lovely to look at, but I'd love to club you to death. So I really rubbed him the wrong way from the get-go. And but my attitude was like, mate, you got nothing. There's nothing you can do that is going to compare to what I've endured in my life. Like I'm stronger than you, and you're not gonna break me. Was essentially the essence that I had, and even to the point where they made recruit school normally goes for 12 weeks. They made me do it for 20 weeks. I was 17 when I joined, so I was really a young, immature, and I was all ego. So they actually said, yeah, that's right. They said you can leave or you can do another 8 weeks. So I ended up staying at recruit school for another 8 weeks. And it was more of the same because he kind of said, this is who this kid is, and et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, it was interesting, but I guess in essence, like I talk about people having lighthouses, and I met my first lighthouses there, you know, like Glenn Bunter. He was an older guy, not much older, probably 5 years older than me, but he took me under his wing, you know. He would take me out. He would make sure I was safe. He would make sure that if I'd had too many beers that I got home, you know, like, so even though he wasn't a lighthouse in the way that he stopped me from drinking beers, but he was there to make sure that I was safe, I guess. And we didn't really know how to have conversations around mental health. Hey, mate, you know, a year without beer, that was non-existent in 1997, right? Like, nobody was even thinking of those concepts. So we're kind of living in a different world right now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, we are, absolutely. Compared to Australian people that drink to England, well,
I don't know. You guys have a pretty big pub culture.
We do. We do. A lot of people are always out drinking, especially when we reopen the pubs.
Yeah, I think it's the same really. Like I went over to England for the Tour de France in 2014, so I went with a mate, and yeah, and I felt like the pub scene was very similar to the Australian pub scene. Really, there wasn't a great deal of difference. You go to the pub, you get your pie, but your pies are different because they're in a pot with a bit of pastry on top of them. Ours are in a thing you can take away and carry. I was just talking about this with my wife yesterday, how England's pies were different to our pies. But I think the culture is pretty similar, really, in terms of, yeah, I don't know. People kind of say Europe is a bit different in terms of alcoholism because it's kind of people are drinking wine and it's everywhere and it's not as bad, or the binge drinking is not as bad, but I'm not sure that's actually factual. I think that's just a perception.
There's a lot of violence when it comes to drink here.
Yeah, I don't think that's any different here. I think people lose their inhibitions when they're drunk. They don't really know what state they're in. So violence is like I wouldn't like Northbridge is our pub precinct. Like I wouldn't go there at 3 a.m. on a Saturday night. You know, I've had my fair share of dust ups at nightclubs or outside of nightclubs when I was younger. You know, I think alcohol, ego, and wounded inner child creates a recipe for disaster, really, and that's kind of what we're seeing, right? That's what we're seeing play out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it does. So, the first time, obviously, with all these challenges you faced, and obviously, when the first time you became a dad, let's talk about that.
Oh, the first time I became a dad. So we had a lot of trouble conceiving. So like when Riley was conceived and we knew he was going to be okay, it was really I just saw it as a blessing, actually.
Okay.
But when my son was born, it was actually I'll probably cry here.
Hey, you're not the first to do it. You're not the first to cry.
So when we were in the room, there was always I'll tell the whole story from the start, right? So
Yeah.
I'm at Bunnings, which is our local hardware, and I've got a bunch of timber. I'm in my backyard, and I'm building a deck or something in my backyard, and I'm covered in dirt from head to toe. And my wife rings and goes, "My contractions are like 3 minutes apart. You need to come home." I'm like, "I'll just have a shower." "No, you're not having a shower. We're going to the hospital." So I rocked up the hospital like filthy, and then everything was okay. But then when we were kind of in the room, Riley had mucus in his bag, so he'd swallowed some of that mucus, and his heart rate was quite low. So when the baby's born, in the room there was like all these extra people that I didn't. In my mind, I'm like, this is not normal. You know, I've got like 3 doctors and 2 midwives and a nurse, and this doesn't feel right. And anyway, they put the suction on or the tongs and they pulled Riley out, and then his score was like a 2 out of 10. So he had a very low score in terms of like health. And all I wanted to hear, and it could have been 10 seconds and it could have been 2 minutes, but it felt like it was a long time between Riley being born into this earth and his first cry. And I knew that's all I wanted to hear. I just wanted to hear him cry, and I knew everything would be okay. And in that moment, I think it was the first time I felt unconditional love for another person, you know?
Yeah.
Like in that moment, it was really I just found myself crying and just in love with this little human for the first time. So that was, I guess that's my experience of fatherhood.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I bet with all your challenges you faced, you're more protective over your child now.
Yeah, I think for the first few years of my oldest boy, I kind of struggled with that a bit. Like I didn't really understand like how I knew that I wanted to be different, but didn't really know how to. Like I didn't have the tools in the toolbox. So it took me a number of years to kind of create some tools to create some safety around that. And like my youngest boy, like, you know, I was home from when he was 2 years old. So I was taking to school when I was in the thick of my PTSD. I would be at my oldest boy's school every day reading to kids in class. Like I would just go drop my kids at school. I'd sit there for 2 hours and just read books to kids at school for 2 hours because I just didn't want to be in my own mind. I just didn't want to be in my own space. So yeah, but it's taken a bit to. But I'm quite proud of my sons. You know, like my oldest boy today, he's just gone. He missed out on the leadership team in year 6, and he's like, I really want to get in the leadership team. And today he's like, he had his leadership interview today at school, and he left all his notes and he just spoke from his heart. And the teachers was like, I've never seen anyone interview like that, let alone a 12-year-old, you know. And I think I was proud of him, but I also had enormous pride for myself and my wife as parents to have raised a young man who's so heart-centered and really balanced in his masculine and feminine kind of energies. He's okay to express, and he's okay to hold space and check on people, and I feel like that's been my gift to him, really.
Wow. See, with my experience, when I was told from my partner that she was pregnant with my son, I didn't show any commitment. I showed fear.
Yeah.
Fear because I didn't know how to do nothing. I was never raised around kids or nothing. So I didn't know. So, yeah. I actually turned to alcohol, me. Yeah. I was an idiot.
Yeah, I don't know. Like shame it's really important not to shame yourself for what we didn't know, right? Like you only knew what you knew in that time. So like you did the best that you could do with the tools that you had, and that's what I said of my mother a lot, but I didn't actually believe that in my heart. I do now. I don't have a relationship with her, but I still believe that she did the best that she could do with the tools that she had. So, yeah, it's important not to, I guess I'm a big advocate of language, right? Like when we lay language around certain things, there can be layers of shame and guilt there. So I kind of just felt that when you said, you know, I was an idiot, you know, it's really important to kind of like, for men not to be like labeling himself that way, you know, because what do you like? What do you like as a father now that you've had some experience?
I'm a pro.
Well, none of us are pros, but I love your confidence. So I guess it's important not to carry those labels, right? Because our kids hear us speak that way about ourselves, and they can pick up on those little subtle things, you know. Like at some point, you got a son?
Yeah.
He might watch back these videos and go, oh, Dad said he was an idiot, you know, like what's that about, you know? Like our kids really pick up on those little nuances. My son will often say to me, hey, that's not actually true, Dad. You know, my 12-year-old will say that to me when I'm talking down about myself, you know, when my voice in my head's talking down to me and I'm verbalizing that, he'll say that's not true, Dad, you know, because we really have deep, important conversations around mental health because I think it's important.
Yeah. See, people have picked up, whether they like me or hate me, they've always said, I may be an idiot when it comes to me being a person, but when it comes to me being a dad, they can't fault me because I'll jump through fire for my kids.
Yeah.
I'll jump through fire, and I will.
But even that language is that you're an idiot as a person. Like, does that? I don't really know you that well, but from what I've seen of your social media and your openness and honesty, I'd say you have more courage than most men in the world, right? Like that's what I see, you know. And if I had people telling me that I'm an idiot, I would quickly delete them from my inner circle because we are the sum of the 5 people that we spend the most time with, right? And so we want people that lift us up, not because we want them to lift us up from our ego point of view, but to lift us up and hold space for us. Like I'm in a men's group at the moment, and I've had a really rough time the last 6 weeks where I had people out looking for me because I was contemplating just swimming out in the ocean and seeing how far I could swim for. And I'd said to my wife, I'm just going to go take myself to hospital, but I left my phone at home. That wasn't intentional. It's just what happened. And my wife called a friend and then called another friend. I had half a dozen people out looking for me. You know, the thing that actually saved me was that I'd sent my son a message, hey, mate, I love you, which was a goodbye message. And he responded straight away with, I'm sorry, Dad.
Yeah.
And I knew in that moment that if I was to take my life, that he would blame himself for that. And that was a turning point for me to go, you know what, if I do this, it's going to have bigger impacts than my highest value is fatherhood. So I just stepped into that, and then I came back and I let the men know that had been looking for me, that I was home and that I was safe. And then today we got locked down for 3 days, and I just went onto the group and I said, divine timing, guys, I've just done all this work for the last 6 weeks because that really threw me in a hole. It threw me back into my inner child, my mother wound, this loss of control. I had this perception that I had this illusion that I had control of everything, right? But I don't have control of anything. And now it's getting locked down. It took me back to my childhood where I had no control of anything, right? So I've had to process that over the last 6 weeks. And tonight, I had these men in this group that I'm a part of. I'm building an online program. And I've had the men that are in that container to say, you're welcome to show up here with your stuff, mate. We will hold you.
Yeah.
And I just felt, and I sent a message, it was just text messages. And I sent a message. I said, I've never felt so much love in my life, from men.
Yeah.
My dad loves me, but so it's really beautiful to be able to be held in that space, right? To be able to have other people around us. So I guess that was, if I circle that back, I lost control. I lost track of my mind a little bit there in that conversation. But if I circle that back to what I was talking about, I want to surround myself by people who love me, by people who hold space for me. And not only they love me, and they love me enough to go, hey, Corey, the way you're showing up in your relationship with your wife now is shit. Like, you're not owning. You need something, feel that need for yourself. Your wife's not there to feel that need for you. You need to feel that need for yourself. And the less needy I am in my relationship with my partner, the better my relationship is with my partner. She knew, she could hear in my voice today when I rung her. I said, babe, I think we're going to get locked down. You're at the shops. Just make sure you get enough food to cover what we've got, what we need for the next few days. And she's like, yeah, okay, I'll be home soon, So it's a different energy when I'm said I'm okay, but she could hear it in my voice that I wasn't, right? And it's not that I'm not okay, it's just that there's remnants of what I've been working through is still there. I'm still shifting through that. I'm still moving through it a little bit, but I'm primarily through it. But I can either slip back right into it, or I can just drop into this space of wholeness and feel it, but not let it rule me. And I've got these men to hold me in that.
See, I was like that last week where I was low, and I was having these thoughts of suicide myself just last week.
I know.
And you saw the post. And,
I sent a message out to you.
You did. And the amount of people that was contemplating saying, fuck lockdown, I'm going round. I'm going round to his house, and I've had everyone try to get in touch with me, but a friend did come round and reassured me.
Yeah.
So
so it's just surrounding ourselves by people who are not calling us idiots, and if they do, say, hey, I'm not okay with that. We certainly shouldn't be saying it to ourselves, and we certainly shouldn't be letting other people say it to us.
Absolutely. So we'll move on, and we'll talk about, obviously, the time you sadly lost your best friend.
I wasn't my best friend, but I'll share the story. So Brendan, it's funny, I had a long history with Brendan. I feel like he was meant to be in my life because he was an alcoholic, and I fired him from a job for being an alcoholic, right? I was his boss, and I said, look, mate, you can't work here. You keep showing up drunk. You went through the normal processes, and then I was working at another company, and Brendan showed up at that company and said, can I have a job? And I'm like, no way, do not give him a job. I've shifted again, and then he's come to that company and said, can I have a job? And the operations manager come to me and said, hey, this guy's applied for a job. And I just said, obviously my heart is starting to soften a little bit, because I said, look, I said, just interview him. If he can do the job for you, then give him the job. I don't want to say anything positive or anything negative about him. I just want to let you make the decision based on the information you have at hand. And they ended up giving Brendan the job. And on the morning On the morning of the incident, our operations manager was off work. He had just had a baby, and I was actually off work sick. I had the flu at the time, but because the operations manager off, I had people on the phone. I need this, I need that, I need this, I need that. So I'm like, I just need to deal with this. Otherwise, my phone's not going to stop today. So I went to work and I told Brendan to move some steel. I'd gone back to the office to make a phone call and say, all right, you're going to get your job tomorrow. Went back out the factory, and it's an industrial environment, right? There's compressors, there's spray guns, there's a particular sound that is familiar in that space, and it was dead quiet. And someone said, you don't want to go up to that space. And instinctively, I walked up. I've done training in the Navy. I've done my first aid, and it's in my nature to help. So I went up there, and they just said to me, we want you. So someone said, someone has to sit with Brendan, and they called someone else, and then they said, no, Corey's going to go and do that. So I went up and sat with Brendan. So basically what had happened, he'd lifted some steel, he hadn't wrapped the chains all the way around, and when he flipped the steel over, it fell off, and a cleat had like gone into his stomach cavity, so it was like a 150 by 150 angle. So I knew, I don't even know how he was alive, right? I don't know how he had consciousness, but he was up on this tube, and I was able to go, all right, we need to do this, and I was able to direct people. I say I had the Holy Spirit sitting on my shoulder, keeping me calm in that moment. And when I passed Brendan off to the paramedics, I felt his soul in the room. Like there was an energy there, like he wasn't alive anymore. And for me, like I kind of lost the next, I don't know how much of the next time I lost, but I certainly lost the next couple of days I've got little fragments of bits and pieces that I remember, but I'd gone out and there was like Channel 9 News was out there and I was screaming at them that they're vultures and like it's disgusting behaviour, someone had just lost their life. And then I'd gone into a shower and I was sitting there fully clothed and someone had come in and changed me. So I had no function. Like someone drove me home. And ironically, that night I rang my mum and I went to my mum's house after my wife was in bed, right, and just said, this is what happened, and then I just started rebuilding my life from there. But that was like, I can talk about it now. Like there's emotion there, but I'm not like, once upon a time I couldn't even talk about it without really being in a state of just in a mess, But I feel like Brendan's still with me now, like the day that he passed is a very sacred day for me. Like I make sure I take some time to sit and think. One year I went down to the tallest tree in Western Australia and I climbed to the top of it because I felt like being up near God would make me closer to him, I've gone, I don't know where he's buried. I haven't been able to find that out because the family took his ashes, but I often go back to the cemetery and sit on a bench outside the chapel so I have this deep connection to, I just feel like my mission in life is driven by the fact that I don't want Brendan's life to be lost for no purpose. I feel like that it's not the only driver, but it's certainly a contributing factor to why I'm doing some of the things that I'm doing in the world.
Absolutely, yeah. Go on.
I feel like when I was at Brendan's funeral, I didn't even know him. I had this story of who he was, right? I had this story that Brendan's just an alcoholic, deadbeat, who has got this dead-end job, right? Like, that was my story. And even though I would go in the factory and I would talk to him and say, hey, mate, how are you? I never actually got to know him. And when I was at his funeral, it just broke me more to see that. I guess it gave me an insight to who I was as a man, right?
Yeah.
And then that gave me an opportunity to shift who I wanted to be. I don't want to be a person who doesn't know people. Like when I saw your thing on Facebook, I'm like, hey, bro, just checking in, I don't even really know you, but that's the kind of man that I want to be, because I wasn't that man.
I acknowledged it, I acknowledged it. Yeah,
I know. Yeah, absolutely you did. But I guess that's where that comes from, like I kind of seen who I was. Like at Brendan's funeral, I got to kind of look at the man that I was and the man that I could be. Like, what would the best version of me look like? And I'm not quite there, but I'm the best version of me with the tools that I have right now, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I would say you're a mental health warrior. I really would. You're doing awesome work. So, where would you see Corey, and not his business, not his mission, Corey himself? Where would you see him in like the next 12-month time?
Oh, where would I be in 12 months' time? I'd like to think that I'd be like Yoda, like be able to have complete control of my emotions, to be able to have situations come up that have triggered me in the past that no longer trigger me. I'd like to think that I feel like the work that I've done over the past 6 weeks has gone a long way towards me being in that space, responding in a way that my wife knows that something has upset me, but it's safe for her to say what's going on for you, and I'm not being an asshole about it, essentially.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's where I'd like to be.
There's no liking about that, man. It's. I feel like people have got two choices in their lives. They either want it or they don't want it. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, we have to strive and push ourselves. Like, I pushed myself to actually get up this morning.
Yeah.
I still feel like shit, but I'm here.
Absolutely. Yeah, it takes work. Like, it's inner child work, right? It's work. And a lot of people will never do the work, like I know I talk to a lot of mums. I take my kids to school lots. I have lots of conversations with different mums at school.
Yeah.
It's interesting. They know my social media profile, so we have open conversations around things that, oh, my husband's been so angry last week. I don't know why. Hey, can you reach out to my husband and come to your men's circle? And I'm like, well, I can't. I said, I can teach you how to have that conversation, but I can't have it for you. So it's interesting, right? Like that. Yeah, you need to want it. You need to be willing to step into the pain to have the growth. And some people just want financial success, and that's it. That's their thing. And some people, everyone needs their rock bottom, right? For me, Brendan was my rock bottom. And rock bottom's different for everyone. For some men, and getting divorced is their rock bottom. I often say, why? So it's interesting when men get divorced, right? All of a sudden, they lose 10 kilos, they give up the cigarettes, they stop drinking so much, or they take up more drinking. But typically, men who get divorced, they know that they're not going to pick up another nice woman if they're out of shape and not looking after themselves, right? So all of a sudden, they get divorced and they become their best version of themselves. Exactly. Why can't they be their best version of self in marriage? I think that often we sacrifice. I think as men, we become providers, and that becomes our identity, and we kind of lose the fact that we need to be doing stuff for ourselves, whether that's a hobby, whether it's exercise. Like for me, the gym is my hobby. Like I love riding bikes, I love going to the gym. That's my hobby. That's what I do. I'm just blessed to be able to do it for work as well. As one of my jobs, I have quite a few different roles, but personal training is one of the jobs that I do.
Because just the other day, it was either yesterday or the day before, I had literally very little energy. And like my partner asked me to do something, like get up and do, like get us something. And I said, no. I actually told her no. I actually went back to sleep because I was very little energy. And it turned out I was actually putting my health and me first over everyone else. And that's what people need to do.
Sometimes, there needs to be a balance, but absolutely. Yeah. There needs to be a time and space when we can go, hey, I'm prioritising myself for the next hour or whatever it is. And often we don't. Often we go, as men, we need to provide. So providing means we go to work, we come home, we spend time with our family, and there's nothing kind of in between that. Like my kids know that on Thursday night, I'm not taking them to bed because I have a coaching call. They know that I work Monday nights and Wednesday nights. I pick them up from school and then I go to work. They you know, they know some mornings that I'm up and I've gone to the gym and I come back and then I'll make them breakfast when I get back. But I'm not. I think, and the other challenge is that when we make our kids our purpose, they come to resent us for it, right? Because often our ego won't let us be in that role without telling our kids that we're in that role, right? Our kids do something wrong. I do everything for you. That becomes the generic response, and then that builds resentment up in our kids, right? Back in my day, I had X, Y, Z, and now you've got A, B, C. You've got it so much better.
Yeah.
Kids don't want to hear that, you know. They just turn off. So I think it's important for men. The most important thing men can do for themselves is to spend time with themselves in silence as one thing, and B, doing something they love, whether it's riding a motorbike or whether it's whatever it is, you know. And for couples, it's to spend time as a couple. So we have separate identities in a relationship. We have a husband, we have a wife, and you have a couple, and then you have kids. So you need to kind of spend time with all of the identities, or spend time on each of the ships that are within the relationship. Otherwise, they all fall apart, right?
Exactly. And this is why me and my partner, we said on the other podcast, lockdown, when it came round, we even said to each other, it was either going to break us or it was going to make us. And we're still together now. And
that's the thing, right? It either made relationships or broke relationships, because people were in each other's pockets so much for that period. I mean, you guys have had it much worse, and we've been blessed, really. We've had, you know, a few weeks and then a couple of days here and there.
We've had months.
I know. Yeah, I've had a few guys from the UK that I've been coaching, so through the pandemic, actually. It's tough.
Who knows? It is. But on that note, thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate your time.
You're most welcome. And if you got like any last piece of advice you'd give to the viewers who are tuning in and who will be tuning in, what will it be?
Be kind to yourself.
There you go. Simple but powerful words. I'm gonna end this podcast now, and I haven't got any like until next week now. So cheerio.